The Russian government stated that a missile attack by Ukraine hit a thermal power plant in the Rostov region last night, causing severe damage to critical infrastructure in the city of Taganrog. As a result, 27 residential buildings in Taganrog were left without heating. There were no reports of injuries or deaths. Taganrog is a port city on the Black Sea in Rostov province in southwestern Russia. It is also the headquarters of the Beriev Aircraft Company, which is well known for manufacturing seaplanes. However, this factory also produces the Beriev 100 aircraft, an airborne early warning and control plane. Therefore, the factory holds significant importance to Russia and is a target for Ukraine. This facility is located 150 kilometers from the front line. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that all 6 ATACMS ballistic missiles were intercepted before reaching their target. The Pantsir air defense system destroyed 2, while electronic warfare systems neutralized the rest. As a result, missile debris fell, causing minor damage to 2 buildings on the airport grounds, 3 military vehicles, and civilian vehicles in a parking area near the airport. According to the ministry, it is evident that this damage was caused by falling missile debris. They also declared that there would be retaliation for the attack. The long-range weapon strikes provided by the West will not go unanswered, and appropriate measures will be taken. However, according to Ukrainian media, it appears that at least a few drones or other missiles managed to bypass Russia's air defense systems. The Ukrainian military has not yet commented on the attack. The Rostov region, located near the border, has been the site of frequent Ukrainian attacks since the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. It is important to note that Ukraine cannot use long-range ATACMS missiles without intelligence and targeting information provided by U.S. experts. In September, President Putin announced a new red line for the conflict, asserting that any long-range attack on Russia using Western-provided missiles would be considered direct NATO involvement in the war in Ukraine. Putin stated that with ATACMS and other Western missile systems, NATO personnel must directly support satellite data and targeting information, including inputting flight mission data into these missile systems. Following the latest escalation, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova warned Russian citizens to avoid traveling to the US, Canada, and several European countries during the Christmas holidays. She noted that travelers risk being pursued by US authorities. The latest ATACMS attack occurred a day after President Putin reiterated the strategic value of the Oreshnik hypersonic missile. He stated that once Russia has a sufficient number of Oreshnik missiles, the use of nuclear weapons would no longer be considered. This statement was a message to the U.S., as the Biden administration believes Russia has no Oreshnik missiles left except for the one tested during the attack on Ukraine's Yuzhmash missile plant on November 21. The U.S. Military Watch magazine wrote that Russia is estimated to be able to produce up to 25 Oreshnik missiles monthly, which equates to production of 300 missiles per year. Following today's ATACMS attack, the Biden administration sensed something significant might be imminent. U.S. officials stated that in the coming days, Russia might soon target Ukraine with one of its Oreshnik hypersonic missiles. The likely retaliation target for Russia is Ukraine, so the Biden administration appears either unconcerned or only slightly concerned. The U.S. has indicated that this missile is not a game-changer on the battlefield. They see it merely as an attempt to intimidate Ukraine and its allies. With a smaller warhead and limited delivery capability, Oreshnik is likely to remain in the course of the conflict. They also downplayed its potential impact by claiming that Moscow has only a limited supply. According to the Biden administration's assessment, Russia is running out of missiles. However, they seem to have forgotten that the West mentioned the narrative of Russia depleting its missile stock as early as March 2022, yet it has not materialized. President Putin might now order a large-scale strike on Kyiv or the command and control centers of Ukraine's armed forces. Russia could also target sites believed to store Western ammunition. All of these potential responses will undoubtedly complicate any efforts by the upcoming Trump administration to broker a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. $20 billion from interest on frozen Russian assets allocated to Ukraine. On December 10, the outgoing Joe Biden administration announced the disbursement of a $20 billion loan to Ukraine. This loan will be repaid using interest earned from the frozen assets of the Russian central bank, a long controversial plan. The White House stated that the amount was disbursed as part of a larger $50 billion loan agreed upon by the G7 during their summit in Italy last June. Explaining the $20 billion disbursement, Commerce Secretary Janet Yellen stated, "These funds paid from the unexpected earnings on Russia's frozen assets will provide critical support to Ukraine as it defends its country against an unprovoked war of aggression." She also emphasized, "We are sending a clear message of determination by ensuring Russia bears increasing costs for its unlawful war instead of relying on taxpayers in our alliance to shoulder the burden." In other words, according to the U.S. Commerce Secretary, this loan will not fall on American taxpayers but will be financed through interest accrued on Russia's $270 billion in frozen assets. However, repayment of this $20 billion loan depends on an EU organization called the Ukraine Lending Cooperation Mechanism. This entity generates profits from the $270 billion in frozen Russian assets held in Belgium, allowing Ukraine to repay creditor nations within the G7, including the US. Yet, this mechanism can only function if EU sanctions maintain the freeze on Russian assets. In other words, this lending mechanism could easily collapse next year if Trump pushes for a ceasefire in Ukraine and a final peace process begins. Trump has also pledged that, if the Kremlin cooperates to end the war, the US will gradually lift sanctions. In return, Russia will undoubtedly exert intense pressure on Trump to demand the return of the $270 billion as part of a phased lifting of sanctions. This means that once Russia's assets are unfrozen under Trump's administration, the US and EU will have to cover the $20 billion taken from Russian assets. Therefore, Yellen's claim that American taxpayers would not foot the bill for this $20 billion loan is far from guaranteed. From Ukraine's perspective, President Zelensky expressed immense gratitude to President Biden and Commerce Secretary Yellen for funding his country. On Russia's side, a day after the Biden administration's announcement, the Russian Foreign Ministry warned that they possess sufficient capabilities and leverage to retaliate by confiscating Western assets under their jurisdiction. When viewed in context, multiple decisions by the outgoing administration and NATO allies appear to be part of an effort to counter Trump and continue funding the prolonged Ukraine war for years to come. Trump has cautioned that Ukraine could face significant cuts or even a complete halt in aid if it refuses to engage seriously in peace negotiations with Russia. A key argument from Trump's camp is that the West must avoid nuclear conflict or the scenario of a third world war with Russia at all costs. Recent polls show that war fatigue is widespread across Europe and the West, with growing public support for peace. American voters have tasked Donald Trump with the clear mandate of seeking to end the war through diplomacy. However, the deep state, in its desperation, continues to undermine both Putin and Trump, with the most prominent escalations being in Ukraine and the unfolding situation in Syria. A significant storm seems to be brewing as Trump's inauguration day approaches. Recent reports suggest that the U.S. is planning to fund to terrorist groups in Syria, continuing to pour money into entities that are enemies of America itself in an attempt to control the situation in Syria. The weapons, funds, and other resources sent to these groups will inevitably be used against the U.S. at some point. This funding, along with hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars already sent and much more planned to be sent to Ukraine, comes as Americans struggle with rising living expenses and daily financial burdens. Syria has become a fertile ground for terrorism, and until a new government is established, the country is plunging into uncontrollable chaos. Ukraine supplies UAVs to HTS to attack Syrian government forces. The situation in Syria has evolved unpredictably, with overlapping ethnic conflicts and interests among both domestic and international forces. Three significant developments have emerged. First, NATO allies US and Turkey in conflict in Syria. The Biden administration is negotiating to address the attacks by the Syrian National Army, a Turkish-backed Kurdish group, against the Syrian Democratic Forces (SDF), a US-backed Kurdish group in Syria following the fall of the Assad government. Turkish officials announced that U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken would visit Ankara on Friday, December 13, to discuss the importance of ensuring Syria's transitional process respects minority rights and prevents Syria from being used as a base for terrorism. The U.S. has expressed concern over Turkish-backed Kurdish attacks on its partners, causing them to lose control over the Tal Rifat and Manbij areas. By securing Tal Rifat and Manbij, Turkey has strengthened its control over critical regions west of the Euphrates River, creating a security buffer along its border. Turkey has long viewed the US-backed Kurds as an offshoot of the Kurdistan Workers' Party (PKK), which Turkey designates as a terrorist organization. Meanwhile, General Michael Kurilla, commander of the U.S. Central Command CENTCOM, visited northeastern Syria on Tuesday to reaffirm U.S. support for these Kurdish groups as a partner force against ISIS. Observers believe Turkey aims to solidify its position under Donald Trump's administration by weakening the U.S.-backed Kurds as much as possible. Trump repeatedly expressed intentions to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria during his first term. However, pressure from the Pentagon and a U.S. media campaign limited his efforts, leading to only a partial withdrawal in 2019. Second, Ukraine supplies UAVs to HTS. According to the report, Ukraine supplied drones to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS for 5 weeks before the rebel group attacked Syrian government forces. As early as September, Turkish media reported the presence of Ukrainian experts in Syria training former ISIS and al-Qaeda militias on the use of drones. Days later, reports surfaced that 250 Ukrainian military specialists had arrived in the Syrian city of Idlib to train extremists on drone operation and production. The report emphasized that the Ukrainian military was training militants linked to the Turkestan Islamic Party, operating under HTS command, to enhance drone speed, imaging, and targeting capabilities. The collaboration between extremist groups currently controlling parts of Syria and the Ukrainian military has reportedly been ongoing since 2022, when hundreds of al-Qaeda militants were allegedly sent to Ukraine to fight alongside Kiev forces against Russia. Third, HTS-led militant groups retaliate against Syria's former government elements. Despite HTS leader al-Jolani's promises of no retribution against Alawites and Christian minorities, recent footage shows otherwise. In Kardahal, Latakia province, a group stormed the family mausoleum of former President Hafez Assad, setting ablaze the coffin containing his remains. Previously, in cities like Aleppo, Hama, and Latakia, rebels and locals had toppled statues of Assad. Amidst this chaos, U.S. left-wing media outlets are reportedly targeting officials nominated by Trump for his cabinet. They also raise concerns about potential security threats during Trump's inauguration, warning of large-scale protests and marches opposing him. Whether these predictions will come true remains to be seen. Thank you for following today's commentary. See you in future updates.